Welcome back, everybody. We are back at it, answering some more questions, solving the universe, a little bit of housekeeping. 32 for 32, I think. So I'm still undefeated. I've got every question so far. So we're doing good. We're saving the world. I feel tumbling. Anyway, we're back at it. Oh, I am aided by and I haven't had any yet, so I might even fail on the first question because I have not had any liquid wisdom, but I'd like to think you will be aided on this journey by a little Omegang Hennepin, which I believe I've had before, but I don't remember. But it's highly recommended, and I'm a big fan of the style, the saison. Or if you know it like I do, saison. Anyway, so that should lube up the mental gears, the intellect. Because that's exactly how it works. Oh, we're also aided by Mr. Baby Founder's Beer. He's getting chubby. Anyway, let us get back to where we were. Let's hang on here. Want that, and we want. Bam! Look at that shit. Okay. This is where we left off, and yes. Oh, I might have missed a parentheses, but other than that one's done. Let's get to the next one. Okay, that was Julia Clark. The next one we've got here is from a Sir Tyler Cohen, who is the Holbert L. Harris Chair of Economics, George Mason University Distinguished Senior Fellow, F.A. Hayek Program for Advanced Study in Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, General Director of the Mercatus Center. I'm sure two of those things don't actually exist. He's a lot of things. Okay. Advanced study in philosophy, politics, and economics. Oof. That sounds like fun and punishment all at the same time. General Director of the Mercatus Center, which has something to do with the Mercatus. Good to digitally meet you, Tyler. Tyler Cohen's last question is: how far are we from wishing to return to the technologies of the year 1900? Wow, this isn't this this slightly dystopian mindset has been evident even in the questions, and this was a couple years ago already. This was 2018, but already this isn't the first question. That's kind of asked a few questions ago. Gentleman asked basically if we weren't going to make the Luddites correct with whatever's coming up, and this is kind of the same question. So maybe I'll just give a little bit spin on my answer there, which I don't remember completely, other than the fact of I just stored a memory bank, solved, perfect, correct. Don't remember the details. We don't need the details right now. The baby next door. Damn it. Okay. Well, he's asking it in a different way though. He's actually asking how far are we? So he's saying it's just a given that we're gonna rue the day. Gaia's gonna wreak its savage revenge upon all of technology in an epic. Well, how far are we? It all depends who you're talking about when you when you say we. I mean, I know what you mean humanity, but I mean, who's to say that the words I just said were all important, but you can forget them also as I restart. We should consider the idea that what we call humans and humanity may be the our interface with technology and our ability, I think, soon to use technologies to experiment more a little bit. You know, there'll be regulations around that and stuff like that. But just I'm trying to put this, that when you say we, it's like there could be people that are headlong into this technology and they are just, that's their thing. And very likely there might be a lot of people that don't feel that way and are reluctant to go that direction. Maybe we will live in a society where, you know, we are still, for the most part, biologically human in terms of the meat sack. But a lot of what we maybe have the ability to do, although it sounds a little scary, I don't think it's really scary necessarily, but for humans to kind of vary more in their cognitive framework toolkit, how much integration they have with these technologies. I'm not sure that would work, but I hope that we get to the point where we're big enough and open enough, and you know, we allow for a big variation in how people want to interact with this kind of stuff. And that I'm also hoping in the same breath that we don't just, that something like this is even possible and we don't just get caught up on this freaking wave and not know where the hell we're going, because that's kind of what I think is going to happen. I kind of think we're on this wave right now when we don't have a good idea. You know, it's like we think we've got the reins, but they're just like, they're not really doing much of anything. We're not, we're probably not nearly as controlled as much as we think we are. How far are we? Well, so I would kind of say it's already done, but when are we going to when are we going to reach peak Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd in 1983 or whatever the hell I wrote that song. If I had to take a stab at it, I would say I think within like 75 years or something. I feel like there's going to be so much technology available and that we can kind of just modify ourselves, we'll still be kind of tied to our biology, or I think likely. I think if we don't kill ourselves off, we'll transcend these mortal coils at some point. But I would say in about 63 years, what is that, 2083? Yeah, about 2083. It's going to be the peak of the we'll call them the subculture. The subculture luditry of, yeah. I hope. I hope we don't in the future see a situation where there is there is strong cultural frictions between people that are more I like to talk slow. Between people that are kind of what I was talking about before, strong and or very integrated with technology and going down that, versus people that are more resistant, more skeptical, more just like traditional. I could certainly see a possibility that one of the ways that we could fight each other and create a like a binary, so it's the white hats and the black hats, is over like the axiom or the axis or the X and Y of of that technology, integration with technology. Whatever things will get names, and those names will be technological things, and they will be appreciated, respected, used, adored by one group, and then called the devil by another one, because that's what we do. And technology is going to be our God and our devil in a little while, and we're, can't say literally, but you know what I'm saying. So that's a nerve. I'm not very happy with my thoughts about that, but seems likely. Happy, cheer. Tyler Cohen, 2083, I believe, is the year that you're looking for. That is tasty. It's a little bit too buttery, slippery on the I am such a picky fucking. It's a little too buttery. It's a very good beer. Anyway, 2083, and yeah, we're not gonna make it. Okay, next up we have, and I have heard of this person before, definitely. A champion badminton player, as well as being Professor Emeritus, Department of Ecology and Evolution, University of Chicago, author Why Evolution is True, Faith versus Fact, Why Science and Religion Are Incompatible. Boy, that's about an hour conversation right there. in a way, they're deeper manifestations of. No, I'm not. Nope, I'm not going to do it. Okay. Jerry A. Coyne's last question is: if science does in fact confirm that we lack free will, what are the implications for our notions of blame, punishment, reward, and moral responsibilities? Responsibility. Okay, so number one, yeah. It's not even defined, but okay, what are the implications for our notions of blame, punishment, reward, and moral responsibility? Yeah, so if science doesn't confirm the fact that we don't have free will, okay, so I don't think it's likely that we don't have free will, or it's never even defined well enough to even make sense necessarily. But yeah, I think free will is a very clever illusion. But we still have to act like we have free will. So we need to be hypocrites fundamentally. Okay, what are the implications? Okay, yeah. So if I say I don't have free will, then I should just be able to what stops me from just going out and killing everybody? Because I don't have free will. That's one possible interpretation of, sinking into chaos and anarchy. I don't I don't necessarily think that it's going to have all that big of changes. I think that even if you can explain free will and give good scientific evidence that it doesn't exist, I don't know if that matters. I think to the average human, they're going to do what they're going to do. And if free will doesn't exist, why would there be implications for anything? We lack free will. So, okay, same thing as. So I want to make sure I wasn't changing this argument. When the program becomes aware of the code, what's that going to change in the matrix? And specifically for things that behave biologically. When the program discovers its code, I mean, there's different levels of that. The free will. I don't think it's going to change that much. I think what will change our notions of blame, punishment, reward, and moral responsibility is that when we're playing, when the ramifications or the relevance, let's say the relevance of existing in such a way that some of the strategies and the tools and the emotional states of blame and punishment and moral responsibility and reward, I think we'll keep changing the game, and so those notions are just not as relevant anymore. They're just like it just won't make as much sense because we're playing a game. We'll get to what I say. A game is how we create culture and everything, and it's the, you know, it's that whole thing. But it's like, you know, used to be when you played the game, and for every other species, when they play the game, the loser is like eaten, and it was, you know. Now, like the loser, certainly, I'm not trying to make light of, you know, humans that are suffering in many different ways, but, you know, the consequences tend not to be as dire. You know, we you know, the winner, you know, gets the pitcher of beer after the bowling, or the, you know, get to crap on another sports team or whatever. For the most part, there's still violence, of course, but we're getting better. When we get more better, I think we'll get to the part where, or we'll continue to go, so where it's like a notion of blame. It's like, blame for what? I wasn't, like, there will be less and less to blame about, and less to less and less reasons to use that. There'll be more space. So I think that's going to happen sooner than just learning the source code that says, oh, you're programmed for these steps. I think the implications, I mean, are going to change, but they're not going to change because of free will, although our knowledge of the lack of free will. Although that in itself, that idea could spur the type of innovations and playing the type of games that the notions, again, of blame and punishment and stuff like that, again, don't have as much weight, aren't as relevant. So that could do that too. Either way, though, I think I'm onto something with my blame and punishment. You know, it'll sound draconian, like, oh no, I'm just walking on a virtual beach. Who am I to blame? You know, I don't, you know, energy was free. I'm just hanging out. But I think that's how it's going to change, is as they just become less relevant, because we're playing games where the loser loses less. If we don't all chop each other's heads off first. So, Jerry A. Coyne, that's my thought about that. And we're checking that one off the list. Okay. Next up, we have... One second here. James Croak, who is an artist. And his question is, why do we experience feelings of meaning in a universe without purpose? I could say two things, potentially. One is that I'm almost thinking of purpose in a there's this talk about a universe from nothing, or at least what physicists kind of think, whatever the theory of the of the formation of the universe. The idea is that it probably started from almost absolutely nothing, and it looked like it just kind of boiled out of this kind of quantum soup, and we're not there yet with the real answers, but regardless. It came from almost nothing, and then from that almost nothing you get a huge thing of things that are you get, I gotta try this right. It's almost like purpose could be something that's like entropy, where maybe you can get local pockets through the physics of the whole thing, or however you want to term that. You could get local pockets of purpose that are like positive, that are averaged out by negative, and so the universe itself is it's like a I don't know, like a rubber mat or something, and there's little if you just average it all out, it's flat, but it's got dimples here and dimples there, and maybe its purpose can be like that. It's just a different way of conceptualizing purpose. I don't know how you'd put that on a chart. I can't even put it on a dartboard. But anyway, this idea that purpose could be not just it's there or it's not, but it becomes, you almost think of it in terms of space-time, almost just like it's like it becomes localized. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's right. I mean, another way to answer is a little bit closer to something we can touch. Is, I mean, yeah, I think the answer to that is that once life gets going, it's an algorithm. It's a self-perpetuating thing. So it's going to want to keep continuing. It's going to want to find strategies to keep continuing. Any kind of adaptations that it can use along the way, it picks up the stuff. And one great strategy for an organism is to be able to model itself. And part of that aspect of modeling it is to is to put into that model guardrails on its actions. And you can say that these things, feelings are kind of guardrails on behavioral stuff. There are other things too, but we'll talk about the poetry before we get to the prose. So it's just what a smart algorithm would get to after time. Because if you can have a model of yourself and then not just feel pain, but feel the idea of pain, because that's one of the amazing things that consciousness does, is that we can imagine doing something and then imagine what that would feel like. So as opposed to kind of other animals that at least we think that the way they work is just they do a behavior and they either die or they don't, and then they do another behavior and it just works or it doesn't. I know that that's oversimplified because there's learning and all kinds of stuff, but humans especially, I'll say humans especially, we get to like play things out in our head before we take that behavior, and it's a huge potential advantage. So there's a huge advantage to being able to model something in something, and then give it kind of guardrails, warning signs as it's emulating itself, trying to make a decision and stuff like that. That's not everything that feelings is for, and not but that's why it's just a good hack. It's a good trick. It's a good, it's I mean, we're designing games, and even in the good games, it's like you got to have it's typically not much of a game unless there's a purpose to it, and we design the purpose. And now we're designing, AI programs, and we're not, there's different levels of purpose as opposed to what we're giving them, I guess. But we're starting to give those things purpose. They're becoming agents. So it's just a good trick. It's a good hack. And I think my second explanation exists regardless of whether my first one does, because I'm not sold on my first one, but it was just a way of thinking. So anyway, James Croak, artist. Why do we experience feelings of meaning in a universe without purpose? One, we may experience purpose as like a binary, but also purpose could be almost like on a wave. Not its average is flat, but there's bumps, and we see the purpose of the bumps. So we just conceive of the idea of purpose differently. Another thing is purpose might just be a meta. It's just an epiphenomenon. No, they can't say it's just an epiphenomenon. I didn't say any of those things. Everything I just said right there, I didn't say. The other reason, I'll just give that second reason, is it's just a good hack. It's a good hack. Because it's like we kind of like hacked the pain response, made a shadow of it, allow us to play with the shadow, with the pain and the pleasure and stuff like that while we're doing simulations. But just as a shadow. So it's like a denatured or vaccinated idea. So it's a good hack. That's all you need to know. Interesting question. Okay, another one off the list. We are on a roll. Next on our list here is Molly Crockett, Assistant Professor of Psychology, Yale University. Distinguished. There's a lot of distinguished folks on this list. Distinguished isn't even that distinguished anymore. Distinguished Research Fellow, Oxford Center for Neuroethics. Psychology and neuroethics. Okay, well, she wants to. Okay. All right, Molly Crockett. Molly Crockett's last question is technology changing the nature of moral emotions? Well, I mean, the short answer is yes. And this is, you know, this question is this, it's very similar to the last one. Mm, well, I kind of want to answer the question the same way. It's like yeah, yes, it is. Um, and and yes, it will. Part of it maybe indirectly again by just allowing us to potentially, energy becomes incredibly cheap, food becomes incredibly cheap. This is Pollyannish, but let's say we go that direction. Everything's really cheap and we don't have to compete that much to get it, and we become much more free, and we're not bumping at each other's way nearly as much, and the competition really is for fun, and it's just something to keep our brains going, but it's just all sports. So admittedly that is remarkably idealistic and utopian, but if we go that way, well, haha, oh, I'm thinking everything I said is wrong. I mean, still technically right, but there's another way that I'm thinking that just like human emotions are, responses to things. I think they may be kind of like homeostatic, or like where they, let's say, like so a lot less people struggle to get food, struggle to get clean water and stuff like that than 100 years ago. So let's just say, 200 years ago, the average person, much more difficult life just in terms of getting stuff and being able to procure enough stuff to even live than in 2020. But so you would kind of naively think that, like the person today would just have more, like the dopamine hit would be better, and they'd experience more joy. And just because if you look at the on the ground situation, person today is much better off. But if I think there's a kind of a part of our emotions that it's always going to find the variation wherever level it's at. Whether it's absolutely terrible to kind of good, it'll find kind of where the middle ground is there and just balance it there. Or if in other ways we should be thinking you do from good to great, it'll find the middle there. It's kind of like it's by design basically going to keep us, even if we rise, it rises with us, and kind of so it keeps us, so we feel the same even if things are a million times better. There's a big part of me that thinks that that's kind of that's how our emotions change, because it's like they'll keep us feeling the same even though, by all manner of looking at the situation, we should be feeling better. So maybe anyway, that's another thought that I have. Yeah, but what specifically about technology? we're certainly going to get mad at computer programs a lot more. That's a given. What happens when we anthropomorphize apps and digitize humanity? Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of thinking more and more. It's like it's very likely that it's always going to find a new middle. So technology isn't going to. I also think that emotions are kind of like the it's kind of like it's like the structures or the pilings or whatever that kind of holds up your your idea of just conscious being, conscious feeling. It's just like those are kind of like the big tents or something like that. I'm not explaining it very well, but just saying like our emotions are like, they poke up first and then they kind of bring up when everything gets a little bit louder after the emotions, then you can start to get the rest of consciousness. But the emotions are there more, yeah. And because from that perspective, if they're kind of like the moorings of our conscious experience, like the things that give it its rough structure and kind of hold it up, if emotions are kind of like that, they're doing that job, and technology is kind of screwing with those at their very kind of whatever, then that says it's going to do more than just change the nature of moral emotion, because that changes like everything. It changes our whole freaking. So yes, and everything's going to be fine. If you feel a little bit of a prick at the back of your neck, just you'll be fine. I wonder where in neuroethics, or just perhaps there are entire areas of ethics that are like unexplored territory, and just because we haven't ever been in a position to think of something like this as an ethics thing or something or whatever. I don't know, but It would be interesting if it was like a whole new world that advances in AI and blah blah blah. And I don't think that's right though. I think we've hit the big deal. So anyway, thank you, Molly Crockett, for that interesting question. Oh, and our next one, and I know this person as well, Helena Cronin. Helena Cronin is the co-director of the LSE Center for Philosophy of Natural and Social Science. Author, The Ant and the Peacock. I've not read that, but I heard it was wonderful. The Ant and the Peacock, Altruism and Sexual Selection from Darwin to Today. Well, there you go. Okay. I don't think I want to answer this question. Helena Cronin's last question is, can natural selection's legacy of sex differences in values be reconciled with the universal values of the Enlightenment? Yeah, I knew it was going to be a question like this. I knew. Yeah. Well, what are we going to do with the crazy uncle who just won't shut up? We're trying to have a good dinner, and this crazy son of a bitch is... Oh, that's I'm naming that Henry. Henry is Helena Cronin's legacy of sex difference in values, because it's just like, you know, because of, the fact that women spend 9 months to carry a child, and they're the vessel of new life. Men are, there are so many things that are because of that, but it's not unequal, but it is different, and not all. I'm also saying that obviously there's been discrimination in the past, and I'm sure there's still discrimination today. It is a difficult question though, because it's like, can Darwin, what would the conversation between, Charles Darwin and Thomas Jefferson and Voltaire and Shaquille O'Neal, what would that conversation be like? It's like, yeah, all we got to do is get away from being sexually reproducing creatures. I think it's but potential that, I know this may sound wacky, willy-dacky, whatever, but I mean, technically women don't really need men. I mean, they need sperm, but you could just grab some you're fine. You've got in vitro, you've got all, whatever. You don't really need men to have a child. But what if we could artificial womb, so you don't have to, it's like boom, boom, and then 9 months later you got a baby, and you didn't have to do any of that stuff. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if that should happen. But if you want to loosen the pull and the that anchor of biology that is going to keep trying to recapitulate differences, not inequalities, but differences. Evolutionary sexual economics are gonna keep trying to, they're gonna keep creating themselves until we get rid of more of the conditions of just until we change the economics of childbirth and child rearing. That's when a lot of these things would change. So yeah, so as soon as we're not human anymore, then absolutely, absolutely, you're gonna be able to square them. It is a tough thing because there's like friction there because there's this biological anchor and it's just so you get rid of you slowly cut the anchor away and the cord. So yes, when we become less human, which I'm not necessarily saying would be a bad thing, can happen. How do we deal with that today? We build a culture that is big enough for all kinds of different people that feel all kinds of different ways about how they want to live. We try and create absolutely a support system for people that, because just being that's what decent species do for other members of decent species. But we try not to coerce, and we try and build cultures that people can value what they want to in their life and be free to explore themselves in their own constructed values. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. I'm gonna get canceled. That was Helena Cronin's last question, and that was interesting. Next one, and un momento. Just gonna do this for the next 20 minutes. Oliver Scott Curry, delicious. Senior Researcher Director, the Oxford Morals Project, Institute of Cognitive and Evolutionary Anthropology, University of Oxford. Okay. Evolutionary anthropology. That sounds interesting. Digging up the old the bones of our evolutionary adaptation, all the evidence of that, and all the interesting. Why his Oliver Scott Curry's question is, why be good? Well, there you go. This may necessitate a little more of the Hennepin. Why be good? I can give an answer. May not be satisfying. Why be good? Because good feels good. Because good is evolution's way of getting us to tomorrow. And it's maybe more than strictly just evolution's way, but at least initially evolution's way of getting us to tomorrow. Now that sounds like a description of the situation rather than a wise dictum grounded in moral certitude, and that's right, because there is no moral certitude here, but being good is better than being bad, at least for the reason is that unless you are programmed in such a unfortunately and fundamentally messed up way, and I'm not even sure if that's even the case. I'm even right about that. So we'll put that on the back burner for a second. Being good feels better than not being good. Being able to think of yourself as good feels better than not being able to think good about yourself. So why should you care about feeling good? Yes, of course, the next logical question. I don't even know that that's a question. That's so fundamental to just. It's at the ground floor of existence, or it's right. It's near there. It's hardware. Whatever. It's down there. I don't know if. I don't know if it's a choice that could even be diagrammed out of the idea of why feel good. It's almost inherent in the definition. It's like that. So being good gets us to feeling good, and feeling good is at the core of just this meat sack, what it does, how it's evolution's hack to get us to the next generation, to tomorrow, and that isn't, and sometimes that isn't that isn't just madly procreating, because that isn't the way evolution works anyway. It's a little more sly and sophisticated than that, especially for big mammals and stuff. It's like there's a bunch of there's a lot of things going on there that are you build the whole cathedral around a very simple shape of a cross, but all the stuff that comes out of it, you're like, So, yeah. Because, I mean, feeling good gets back to the proxy of just like, you know, our most base stuff, but also just like, I'm sure a fish can, it feels when it's hungry. It's got to, there's got to be something in the consciousness of which is a trout that if it hasn't eaten, it's like there's something there, right? Probably there's it feels something when it hasn't eaten and it's hungry. So that's so deep at the core that even it's that and that is also that's life's hack. That's life's biology's guardrails. Just to say, oh, you're off the thing there. Need to eat, and it's a feel. It's you know, it's like the first steering wheel of life. You know, I don't know if cells can feel. I don't know how you would measure that. I'm not sure how you measure feel in humans, but it's the, you know, it is. It's like the rules of the language, like the structure of the language upon which biology is built. Something like that. Use some of those words, add a few more, take out some other ones, and it's perfect. Anyway, Oliver Scott Curry. Why be good? Because it feels good. Why should we feel good? We got no choice. It's just there. That's down at the root. We need to want to feel good. That's evolution's hack. It's what it does. Very good question. Next, we've got David Dalrymple, research affiliate at MIT Media Lab. And his last question is, could the thermodynamic prophecy of holy shit, I need to set. Could the thermodynamic prophecy of an increasing entropic universe, okay, be fulfilled by the cosmic flourishing of intelligent life? Say, now entropy is one way of thinking of it is a measure of order and disorder, right? Thermodynamics, that's your Newton's second law, right? Basically, that order will always decrease over time in a closed system. That's the second law, right? So how can you have human beings? That's the same you have snowflakes. It's not a closed system. Same energy that makes snowflakes makes fetuses. Okay. But, so the question is, if entropy is going to be increasing in the universe, could that be fulfilled by the cosmic flourishing of intelligent life? But entropy increasing, the way I always did it, is it had to basically become more like noise, become more like Oh. I don't know if I know what he's thinking of, but if it's anything close to what I'm thinking of, that's kind of interesting. The idea that I'm getting is that the order in the universe um, will become more uniform, or it'll just be more everything kind of evening out, instead of now, at least what we look at as, we see the universes, and although there is a fair amount of disorder, there's also structured stars and galaxies and nebulae, and then there's just nothing forever, and then there's, so it isn't just all smoothed out. I mean, if you look at a far enough away, it becomes smoother, and there's like a mesh and everything. But I think what David is saying is that, or at least the idea that I'm getting, is that um, the cosmic flourishing, at least I'm getting almost a visual in that. It's just that, like, if you look at the universe from a very, um, I'll say 50,000 foot or 50 trillion light year, 50 billion light year away, you look at it and it's kind of like a clumpy mesh now, but then intelligent life could almost become so widespread throughout the universe that it becomes kind of like the fine grained um, lattice of just average kind of whatever, and it just smooths away all of the matter that we see that's like condensed into galaxies and stuff like that. It just becomes kind of like a webbing that just covers the universe. I have no idea if that's what he's actually talking about, but that's the way I was conceptualizing it. And no. All right, next question. No. um, I'm just going to think of it that way because that's what I thought of. And, you know, um, if we learn to be able to use physics and the laws of physics and all that stuff the way that you think we're going to be able to use it, why wouldn't we be able to just kind of just occupy Wall Street if Wall Street is every Planck scale on the known universe or whatever? We become we just become information, and we're just scattered as information. Hmm. I think I think there's a fair chance of that. I think there's a fair chance of that. I want to see that. I want to see that movie. I want to see that. I think it'd be more like a two season on HBO or something like that. But I could see it. Like it kind of lonely at the end, or loneliness goes away as an idea. Anyway, very interesting question. Let's do one more here. This next one is Kate Darling, who's a research specialist at MIT Media Lab. A lot of MIT Media Lab around here. These people seem to, I don't know, you know, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because one of us has to, and I don't. Harvard and fellow at, not distinguished. Oh man, I'm not even doing this one. Skip over. Fellow at Harvard Berkman Center. Okay. Kate Darling's last question is, I like her, I like the defined face with the cheek and stuff like that. She has a very good structure to her face, and the picture pulls it off. What future progressive norms would most forward-thinking people today dismiss as too transgressive? What future progressive norms would most forward-thinking people today dismiss as too transgressive? Okay, so what are the things in the future that that even people today that are saying we've got to change how we do this because we shouldn't be chained to our biology anymore, and we're better than this, and we can, blah blah blah. What are the things that even they would be like, oh shit, like that? I don't think we want to pull that lever. What future progressive norms? All I have to do is predict the future in startling levels of detail. I'm going to have another sip of beer. Just because I'm a dick, I'm going to say women no longer having the right to vote. I'm kidding, of course. I had to swing it the other way, because it's there. You gotta swing it the other way. This is a tough one because it's like, I mean, we're going to be done with factory farming at some point. Hopefully done with, I don't want to necessarily say done with meat, but done with making sentient creatures hurt in order to get meat. We'll be done with that. Because that's the problem I have with. Anyway. It's a freaking tough one. There's part of me that thinks, and I'm not even a big fan of this thought, but it thinks that we might just end up just kind of giving much more influence and time for our children, maybe that are spent by the state or the arms of the state, or that would be just a given at some point that they've just figured out better ways to do stuff to raise children, and just you'll still see them, of course, on the weekends, but I don't know. I don't know if that even. I don't know. I don't know if that even makes any sense. Because won't we just be able to give them a chip? I know kung fu, and then who needs the whatever? I don't know. That's a tough question. What is it that? Well, what is it that? Well, I wonder if it will be something like equality is a very man. Equality is a huge thing for progressivism. I think we could pretty much agree on that, and that's been a huge just area of concern, and just mode of kind of we need to get rid of inequality. Well, so then why would we allow, why, if you did really well or something like that, should you be able to pass that on? Because what did the baby do to do anything? I mean, you're fundamentally creating an unequal system just by passing on your whatever you've stored up or whatever. Now that would break. I mean, that's not that's beyond a wealth tax. That's like a wealth. Yeah, it doesn't it counts for nothing. The kind of just complete, like, you don't have a will. Like the concept of a will doesn't make any sense. There's it. New baby here has every freaking advantage and has all the same advantages that everybody else. You can't gift it something from the ghost. Your ghost can't give you anything. That is a strategy, or a a way to think of how we should treat children and culturally do that kind of stuff, which there's a certain morality to it. I get that there is a certain morality to that idea, but I'm not sold on the morality, and I'm also, it's a fragile system, I think, because it could easily be broken by any group that wanted to just accumulate stuff. It would break that system. So there would have to be very strict and draconian measures to enforce something like that. But hey, it's not like progressivism doesn't have the ability to be draconian and whatever. So I will say, as one, yeah, I mean, the idea of just a transfer of wealth is down the generations is a progressive norm that may cost a lot to regulate that idea, but would. But even today, you think progressives are like, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, what are you talking about? You can't, that doesn't make any. Yeah, we're gonna shut that. going to shut that level of evolutionary economics off at the nozzle. So that one. That was an interesting question, Kate Darling. 36 for 36. All right, let's do one more here, and then let's Luca Di Biase, journalist editor of Nova 24. Journalist editor of Nova 24 of 11 Sol 24 Ore, Il Sol 24 Ore. We're just going to keep going, and because I'm largely ignorant of things, Luca Di Biase's last question is, if we want to make a real and effective science-based policy, should we change politics or science? Well, at a somewhat surface level, you can't change science, because then it wouldn't be science. I mean, if you're going to if you're going to somehow change the findings of science or whatever to make it more palatable, to fit it in nicely, to give some structure to a policy that you want to do. That's you're no longer doing science. You're doing advocacy, and you're doing whatever you are, but you're not doing science. So if you change science in that way, you're not changing science. You're just not doing science. Science should be the worshipful, dispassionate pursuit of the truth. I should say worshipful of the search for truth, because we can't actually even find it or even be unbiased in how we do it, but we have to worship the idea that we can. And stick to the so at a surface level, it has to be the politics. But part of the politics could just be communicating the science. That has been part of politics. So is shades of the different science. But anyway, also, I mean, I'm just going to say science-based policy is the idea that, and I'm not saying that Luca Di Biase is saying this, but I'll just say it, but the idea that, we can develop more science and understand more things scientifically and stuff, and the idea that that is directly applicable to social, cultural mechanisms, and we can just take science and plop it on humans and just fix them, because no, it's not that simple. It's we aren't just scientists, we're poets, but more concrete than that. There are a great many things that we do and that we are built of, even, you could look at science as like the searching through the landscape of the rational, the things that are reasonable, the things that kind of make sense, that follow from one each other, that, explain laws and stuff like that. Great, wonderful. Humans aren't just rational. We aren't, we aren't just reasonable. I mean, there's parts of who we are that don't even answer to the questions of rational and reasonable, and probably never should. I'm not saying we shouldn't incorporate reason and science and all those things in certain parts of our where it's appropriate, but it's not always appropriate. And so, and you also won't just be able to. People differ, and the part of the difference of people is the game itself. So you can't, you can't just take science and look at, if we just all have to be this way, because no, the directions we're going is part of the game itself. So you can't use science to answer all the questions that may be the things that might inform policy. Policy should have scientific input, as much as possible, certainly, but not we don't have to just think like scientists. And there's places that reason can take us that we don't even necessarily want to go as humans. So reason can be its own weapon. So the answer to your question, Luca DiBiase, is we need to change the policy, not the science, but we should also not pretend that science is the be-all, end-all, and it's always the lone or the last voice or the loudest voice. Some things that we do are just not explicable to the kind of questions that that science can speak to. Good question. Interesting question. All right, let's try and get this one more. Okay. Stanislaus Dehaene, or Dehane, I apologize, I'm not sure which one. I'm going to say Dehane. Oh, but it's, is that French? Because then I could throw everything out there. Might have to roll my H's. Anyway, Stanislaus is a neuroscientist at Collège de France, Paris, author, Consciousness and the Brain. Oh man, this might not be the easiest one to end on. Oh boy. Hennepin and the Brain. Stanislaus' last question is our brain fundamentally limited in its ability to understand the external world? Well, yes. Yes. At least in this way, I think. Let's simplify the brain here and just this little globe, this little ball, whatever, and it's got wires leading out to it, almost like, say, a USB cord or an HDMI cable or a whatever, and it's leading out to your eyes and your tongue and your fingers and your skin and all of these devices, which we could also call interfaces, which are what it uses to create its model of the world. So the only So the brain is at least limited in the way that it's limited into the number of interfaces and the type of interfaces that it's able to, that it's using. You know, it's like, oh, it's got a fax machine now. It can smell ink or whatever. But it's like it's limited by its interfaces. That's one part of it. So it's by the various different information gathering modules, mental modules, and whatever, that limits its ability to understand the external world, you know? So in that way, at least. And of course, you know, we are fundamentally limited, of course, because we are only perceiving the external world, of course, through our senses. We're not touching it. We're getting the input from our interfaces. Kind of saying the same thing, but so. So yes, you know, in our brain is like our brains. I'm going to say this the wrong way around, but it's like yes, we're looking at everything in the world looks like a leak or a pipe because our brain has created us to think of the world in terms of plumbers, like we're plumbers, to view the world in terms of pipes and loops and stuff like that, because that's the effective way that it's found to get us to model the world, to get us through the world. I'm not saying that it literally makes us think of things like plumbers. I'm just saying we get a brand, reality gets a brand, because that's effective for getting us forward in reality. So whatever reality is, we don't really ever touch it. It's just defined as the set of phenomenon that get us more successfully, the mental construct that gets us to the next generation. So it is utterly subjective, and that is purposeful, and that's a feature, not a bug, is the fundamental subjectivity of the brain. So if you consider subjectivity a limitation, then there's that limitation as well. So it could go into what the hell is the external world, because that sounds like it's, anyway, we're not going to go there. So that's my thoughts. Hey, okay. I know this gentleman. Shaking hands with this gentleman. He's an interesting gentleman. Although everybody is less interesting on Twitter. Daniel C. Dennett, philosopher. Austin B. Fletcher, professor of philosophy, the co-director for the Center for Cognitive Studies at Tufts University, author From Bacteria to Bach and Back, which I got the audio version and I've listened to about a third of it, and I need to listen to the rest of it. It's very interesting. It's yeah, it's his way of writing can be a joy because it kind of he he wants to really pin things down kind of philosophically so that they're set and they're like anchored there, because then he's gonna build stuff that's gonna like take you way out there.
YouTube has this result.
It's all over. So anyway, Darwin's Dangerous Idea was the first book I read by Daniel Dennett, and that was a very interesting book, talking about Darwinism as like the universal acid, and how it just kind of reverts the whole thing of like you've got to get intelligence and whatever, and then you get order, and it's like, or then you get complexity or whatever, and it's like it just inverted that. And it's like, no, just give me time and stupid, and the laws of physics basically, and I'll get you complexity and crazy shit. It's like inverted the whole thing, and it's the physics of biology. Anyway, Daniel Dennett's last question is: how can an aggregation of trillions of selfish, myopic cells discover the unwitting teamwork that turns that dynamic clump into a person who can love, notice, wonder, and keep a promise? How can an aggregation of trillions of selfish, myopic cells discover the unwitting teamwork? The teamwork. Okay, that's the key here. How do you get that teamwork out of a churning chaos of individuality and mutation and chaos and reproduction and whatever? How do you get how do they get the teamwork? Well, okay, we'll take a trillion cells. I mean, it wouldn't work this way necessarily at first in nature, but let's just take a crap load of cells and put them right together, and they're basically the same thing. They're just a simple cell, and they're doing their thing, and they're inputting, they're taking in energy, they're taking in something from the environment, processing it, using that, expending it to do something else, and they're all doing it individually. Life is good, whatever. What happens when there's some conglomeration, and this is mostly just a thought experiment, not a I'm not trying to say this is exactly the way but just as a thought experiment, what happens when there's some configuration of those things that used to be individual, now because of some kind of configuration, the way the sun hits the thing, they get more flexibility or something, and there's something else that makes like two of them kind of actually work better than one if they're aligned this way, just because of kind of the physics of the alignment and stuff like that. Very simple things, but it's like okay, well, you just need that to happen, and then for it just to happen that there's just something simple, something or maybe something complex that could potentially happen a trillion times to something really, or I'll say it the other way, very complex, but maybe it only happens 1 in a billion times, to something that might happen 1 in 100 times, but it falls apart almost all the time. But just as soon as a there is some type of grouping which becomes in any way differentially more successful than the individuated things, you're going to get something like that. So there is probably at some fundamental level a competition between individualism and collectivism at a very almost physical level that I almost look at as like kind of like dynamical laws of the universe that the nature of individualism versus collectivism is something that's always kind of like a tension, and there's always the potential for because they both have their advantages, and in every different domain they sometimes it's better to be collective, sometimes it's better to be individualistic, and it's almost a gain in and of itself, the tension between those two things. So you get sparks, which gets you teamwork sometimes, just churns out of the algorithm. If you want details, I mean, I'm not going to dig that up, but I mean, and I will also say that not to spill the beans or whatever, but I think he actually kind of questions that too. Or, sorry, he actually answers that questions. My words, my letters. Sandy sells seashells by the seashore. He does a much more detailed, much more burying the philosophical stakes in the ground to erect a tent of knowledge of the explanatory idea of answering that question in his book, From Bacteria to Bach and Back. So he's done that work in a level of yeah. I just told you that I think the Etch-a-Sketch out by the sandbox has a piece of black over there. He's actually built the house and all of the floors, and just, yeah, I mean, in that book, which is pretty interesting. So but yeah, tension of the friction of the differential potential competitive success of individualistic versus collective is that thing is like, it's always, it's like, what can get more efficient? How can it work better? And if there's a chance to, it's just going to happen. It's there. 38 for 38. All right, last one. I should try and get through the D's. Maybe I can do that. Coyne-Derman, who is the professor, financial engineering, Columbia University, author of, Models Behaving Badly. You can think of that several different ways. That's funny. It's talking about economic models, financial models, and just they're not doing what they should be. Coyne-Derman's last question is, are accurate mathematical theories of individual human behavior possible? Are accurate mathematical theories of individual human behavior possible? Well, a mathematical theory of individual human behavior is not necessarily a, 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 a complete description of individual human behavior. You know, a theory couldn't it still lend itself to probabilities and yeah, things like probabilities and stuff, and not just some type of deterministic, um, you know. Um, plus or minus, plus or minus. It's kind of like individual behavior is the Schrodinger's cat, or the Feynman's sum over histories, or just like it's like individual behavior is quantum, whereas group behavior, societal behavior is more classical. So it's like we can kind of make some predictions at the classical level, but you try and go down to the quantum level. Wouldn't that be interesting if it actually were some kind of deep laws that are interacting at um, um I think, yeah, probably in theory. What would be the math, though? What would it look like? I mean, well, uh, oops. I don't know what happened there, but whatever. It's all good. Um, so they did this research where was it Benet? I think it was Benet. No, not Benet. Who was the guy? Lebet? Benjamin Lebet, I think. Anyway, I talked about it a little bit. Hooked people up to these neurons up to their brains, and then hooked them all up. And anyway, at one moment in time, all they had to do was basically like choose to either like tap a button, a buzzer on their left hand with their left hand, or tap one with their right hand. But they would have to they could decide at any time, but as soon as they decided, they noticed they decided, they would have to mark down that time on this clock. That kind of went really fast, but the clock went like, 1 second was like all the way around, so they could get a real distinct. Okay, so anyway, so they note down what time they decided, and then they click it, very quickly after that, because, you're like, boom, boom, and you can do it. What they were able to do and find out is that because they had these implants in the people's brains, they could measure what was going on in their brains and actually map out all of the electrical things that were going on, and find out that the electrical impulses that were like going and traveling, from your brain to your arm, in order to tell your hand to do this, like the traveling time takes longer than the reported time of this, of when they said, okay, at this time I'm gonna do this, but then they measure the travel time for the brain just to tell the hand to go like this, and it's longer than the time that they measured here. A long story short, what I'm trying to say is that that is individual human behavior, and they were able to like get so they understood it well enough that they could just kind of like, from what I'm remembering about this, they could predict which hand the person, the subject, would tap sometimes up to like 5-6 seconds before he would do it, like literally, like, and it's just like, holy shit. Yeah. So it's like, what is the math behind that? You know, I could. You could make the case that the math behind that is not the same kind of math as the math which would constitute long-term thinking and goal setting and stuff like that. Now you're just talking about how our mind creates virtual reality at a very inner body level. But either way, what is the mathematical theory explanation? Because we don't have one. All we have is the readout. We've got the readout of how the neurons that are fired and stuff, and the fact that they seem to be fired before we're aware of anything. So we've got like just the readout, but we don't have any of the explanation. We don't have the math. We don't have the formulas, the algorithms that would give us the math. But it would seem eminently possible because we've got well, looking at the graphs where we can predict that. So just like put math behind it. So part of me definitely wants to say yes, but part of me wants to think that that might be a special case of a very, very base layer of like looking at looking at how we create the matrix, the interfaces between our different bodies, and then how we recreate that to make it causally make sense to us. So that might be a special kind of chicanery that our that our consciousness does, which doesn't apply to larger individuals, still at the individual level, but of longer things and things that aren't just kind of what we would call motor function. So the question is yes, and the question is let's get a formula around an fMRI machine doing its thing. Let's get formulas around that first, and then we can maybe say, yeah, we might be able to get somewhere. Or it may just be some kind of fundamental constant of the universe that things are more. The behavior of the larger the scale of the measurement that you're taking is, the more predictable the behavior of what you are measuring becomes. Maybe that's a fundamental thing about the universe. It's just more, at least theoretically, or more practically, more mathematically, whatever, more computable, more at larger and larger scales. Maybe. That was Emmanuel Derman. So, good question, interesting question. Thank you. My brain dead. I'm taking a break. Thank you all very much. I'm pretty sure we nailed every one of these as well. Kia Sorrento.